Should Catholics celebrate Halloween? That's the question we're asking this week. And you wouldn't believe the amount of people who think that Catholics should not participate in any Halloween activities. I mean, should we send our kids out trick-or-treating? Should we dress up? What are we celebrating anyway? Those are some of the questions that we'll be looking at tonight. But we begin on the streets.
My husband and I are having a Halloween party, a costume party, and we're inviting both our Christian and non-Christian friends to come and attend, to get to know each other and hang out and just build community.
I'm actually working, but my husband is taking out my son and a bunch of the other kids in our condo building whose parents are actually working. So he's got, I think, 5 or 6 other kids that he's going to take out trick-or-treating.
My plans for Halloween to do what every man in the second half of his life do. Watch David Suzuki, The Nature of Things. What else? It's scarier than that. He tell you when the world's gonna come to an end. When was the next ice age, right?
My plans for Halloween are nothing Halloween related. I'm going to a reunion with some friends.
I have children, so the children will be walking up and down the street collecting candies, and we'll be distributing candies. And so we have a very vibrant neighborhood, so Halloween is a very much alive place. And those are our plans.
Those are some of the people on the streets of Toronto telling us what their plans for Halloween are this year. And joining me now to discuss this issue, we have two dads, parents of trick-or-treat age children. Patrick Douglas, he's a father of 6, and Jason Gennaro is a father of 5. Welcome, you guys. This whole idea of celebrating Halloween, what are we celebrating? What do you think? Are we actually celebrating something?
Well, I think from the Catholic perspective, and sort of as we teach our children, it's the Eve of All Saints.
Okay.
So it's simply that.
So that's...
Yeah, agreed. It's the Eve of All Saints. This is a time when we venerate those men and women in our history, in our culture.
So we're celebrating All Saints.
Yeah, we're celebrating All Saints.
On the eve of All Saints Day.
Correct.
And that's, I think, historically correct as well.
Well, yeah, because as Catholics, we've got this great tradition of the vigil. Right, so on Saturday we celebrate a vigil mass.
Okay,
and
and that's fine. And that's fine. Now, here in Canada, All Saints Day is not a holy day of obligation. It's the feast is moved to the Sunday, so most people are not going to church on the eve of All Saints. They're not going to mass on All Saints Day. So what we're celebrating actually is that kids get dressed up and get free candy. So what are we celebrating?
That's what some people celebrate, sure, but I think that we have the opportunity. Just like we have the opportunity with other holidays that we celebrate, both as a church and a society, to Christianize those holidays, to re-Christianize them, to bring them back. So whereas many people might be just going out getting free candy, and hey, there's something good about that too, there is the opportunity to evangelize.
Okay, let me read you a comment right off the bat. This came from Michael Lujan from California. He says, "It's like asking whether Catholics should participate in Christmas activities. It's our holy day, All Saints and All Souls." So he's very much agreeing, I guess, with what you guys are saying, that we're not doing anything else but celebrating All Saints and or All Souls, which is November 2nd, the next day. So you guys don't have any issue with that?
Not at all.
Is this another Catholic feast that has been hijacked?
I think in a certain sense it has been, yeah. For sure.
But in the same way that Christmas has been hijacked, or has it been hijacked in a different way?
It may have been hijacked in a different way, but that doesn't prevent us from taking the opportunity to, like Jason said, sort of re-Christianize or evangelize the world that we love. We can't just sort of say, okay, well, there's some really bad sort of elements that have sort of crept into this holiday and some of the occult and this and that, but not just sort of put it aside and say, okay, we can't touch that. What can we bring to people? What light can we bring to people? And how can we integrate that within our families?
Now, you've been talking a lot about evangelizing, because that's your thing. You've done a little bit of history check on Halloween, and
Correct.
Because I think a lot of people think that pagan origins of Halloween that have brought in all these ideas of death and goblins and ghouls, but my understanding is that it's actually the Catholic roots where all this kind of dressing like death comes from.
100%. And even before that, where first we have to say that everything that's pagan was first Catholic. God created everything. So when the pagans came and made celebrations, they were celebrating, unbeknownst to them, our God. They were trying their best to do that. So everything that was pagan was originally Catholic in a theological sense. Now, the truth that there was a holiday in Ireland that dealt with the dead and that it had to do with the harvest, that's true. But the Pope at the time in the 8th century, 9th century, actually made the feast of Halloween, not Halloween, All Hallows Eve.
So Gregory III.
Gregory III. It was a universal feast before.
Gregory IV made it a universal feast. Gregory III had made it a feast in Rome.
In Rome, yeah. Before we ever knew that it was a feast out in what was the hinterlands in Ireland,
the
right?
Celtic country. Okay.
But in the 14th and 15th centuries, we find with what I found through research was that we had the bubonic plague, people were dying, and Catholics were better understanding, because that's the development of doctrine. We better understand as life goes on that the four last things, that death was part of life, and that there was something that we needed to recognize.
Okay, show me your rosary. Do you have it in your pocket?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've seen this. Jason just showed me this before we started taping the show, and I'd never seen this. So this is a rosary. I mean, it's a decade of the rosary with a skeleton on it.
That's right, a skull.
This is a skull. Very much what I would think is like a Halloween decoration. Yeah. But this is your rosary, and this is a Catholic.
It's a Catholic, 100% is a Catholic. Well, because we used to, as Catholics in the 15th and 16th century, we used to have in our art something called Memento mori, Latin, remember your death. And you would see in the old portraits, old paintings, you'd see skulls, sometimes with candles, sometimes with fruit.
Yeah, we do see them in art.
And the idea was that even though there's beauty in the earth, even though there's everything there, and it's all good because God created it, you still need to remember what you're created for, which is death, because death is the doorway to eternity, which is happiness.
So that skull, that memento mori, reminds you of your death.
That's right, but in a good way. Not reminds me of my death that I'm macabre and all the time I walk around saying, "Well, I'm going to die at any minute, and this is the worst thing in the world."
It's not a morbid thing.
It's not morbid at all. It's I'm recalling that I'm made for something greater, and that greater is union with God, and union with God comes through death.
I grew up in Latin America, you guys know, and not so much in Panama where I grew up, but I know Mexico is a big thing, the Day of the Dead, which is All Saints Day. But on the eve, people go to the graveyard because that's where their loved ones are, and they have whatever ritual. I don't know if they bring offerings or whatever, and it sounds superstitious, but I mean it's a way to honor your dead relatives, but that's what they do. So the idea of going to the graveyard, again, it's very much rooted in this Catholic belief that we believe in purgatory. See, I maybe ask you what you guys think about this whole, so we have All Saints Day, where we remember the saints who are in heaven, and All Souls Day, presumably, are the ones who are in purgatory. When we say that we remember the dead, are we talking about the same thing?
I think when we say we're remembering the dead, we're remembering the souls that are in purgatory in particular, but in a special way for All Saints Day, we're remembering those who have actually been canonized and we recognize as being in heaven. So there's a celebration there that, our destiny is to be with God and to follow these saints. And so when we're praying for the dead, we're hoping that they too, obviously they will, but very quickly will achieve that end.
Let me read you another comment, and then I'll ask a question. So this came from Stephanie Romano in Toronto. I feel like participating appropriately is okay. Overdoing it on the guts and gore might turn into something morbid. But dressing up as a character from history is okay, and no child should be deprived of some charitable candy. Which I know what you think, Jason.
Yes,
but in terms of morbid, so in terms of your memento mori, would it be appropriate to dress like the Grim Reaper or like a skeleton as a reminder of our death?
I think it all depends on how it's done and what the purpose is, and how you're carrying it forward to celebrate and evangelize. For instance, let me take a step back and say to you, we won't take our kids to certain amusement parks that do blood and gut theme nights because that's not the proper celebration of Halloween, first of all, but also because that's not the proper celebration of death. We don't get entertainment. Entertainment is not supposed to be somebody kills somebody and I find that entertaining. You wouldn't do it in real life, so why would you allow yourself to participate in it as an exercise, for entertainment value?
Okay.
So no, they're just like, it's okay to have a funeral mass for somebody, but it may not be. It's not okay to To,
Okay, well, let me ask you this.
to
and
do
I'll
Weekend
ask
at Bernie's.
Patrick, because you both have daughters, and I'm sure that
Yes.
they're dressing up as little princesses or whatever. But if she wanted to dress like a vampire, or a werewolf, or a skeleton, would you let her?
I think it's also age appropriate. With the age of my children now all under 8, I don't think that would be an appropriate way to sort of celebrate or dress up. I mean, they don't really know too much about that sort of thing at this age. And I think even when they're older as well, we'd have to be careful to see, okay, well, for what purpose, for what reason? Is it part of a fantasy? Is it part of a make-believe? Or is it sort of just jumping on the bandwagon with what's in fashion with the culture?
Okay.
So it would have to be sort of well thought out, I think, depending on what the circumstances would warrant.
Yeah.
I'm going to agree with Patrick on that. I think that there's, in everything that we talk about, it's not so black and white. There's a lot of gray there, and there's a lot of room for discernment and for saying, okay, well, maybe if you do this, then it's more appropriate or not. The one that strikes me as probably almost 100% no would be a vampire. I think that there's real danger in glorifying vampires, in taking part in that kind of almost worship, because then you really are toying with the occult.
Okay, vampires, werewolves, Satan.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're going to get into that, but we're going to take a little break right now. It's a short break, and when we come back, we are going to get into a little bit more of some of these other pagan rituals or themes that are creeping into Halloween. And we're also going to be able to give you some creative ways that you can help your children who might be confused as to some of these competing thoughts for Halloween, so don't go anywhere.
Let us know your perspective. Email us at perspectives@saltandlighttv.org or reach us by mail. Perspectives at Salt and Light Television, 114 Richmond Street East, Toronto, Ontario, M5C 1P1. Or call us toll free at 1-888-302-7181. Let your perspective be heard.
I don't really know. I guess it's just fun to dress up and take the kids out.
You get a chance to get away from like the normal, like you get a chance to dress up, delve into your fantasy world, just live.
For us, it's about having a place where we can come together and dress up and have fun. Not so much the spiritual or dark element of it, but just an opportunity to hang out with people and have a good time.
I think it's a good way for young kids to have fun, and dress up as their favorite characters or whatever they like. So I don't know, it's just out of a spirit of fun,
Well, back home in Lebanon, what we used to do is we go door to door and they play music, and there's Hassan and Hasna, and they dance, and they give us candies or money. The better we dance, the more we get. So you keep dancing, and if they don't pay, we have a bad song for them.
I think it's great to find a reason to get dressed up and have fun and be silly for one night.
I don't really see a point behind it. It's kind of like Festival of the Dead, which is how I've always understood it. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of Halloween, but hey, as long as there's free candy, I'm there.
Those were, again, some people on the streets in Toronto sharing with us their thoughts on what they're celebrating for Halloween. Now, I've always been intrigued by this idea of kind of what we are celebrating. We talked already about this a little bit. It reminds me of this idea that we, as Catholics, how we venerate our saints in terms of relics. You go up to Midland, and there's Saint Jean de Brebeuf, half of his skull. I think that for some people that might be a little weird, but we have bones and locks of hair and stuff like that. I mean, the catacombs in Rome are full of. What do you guys think about that kind of venerating?
Every church altar in the world has some piece of a saint in it, right? We read in Acts of the Apostles that they cut up Paul's clothes and they handed them out, and they brought them
around. Clothes is one thing, right? So then we're talking about dressing up as a skeleton.
But it's all piece by piece. As Catholics, we believe in the tangible, right? All the world is good to some extent, because that's what God created, and he thought it was good. So that means the stuff you can touch, hear, smell. It's all good, and we make use of that. Right?
Okay, so in that context, again, same question: would you let your kids dress up as a skeleton? Because when we venerate X saint, we're venerating the bones, or an incorrupt body. That's can be weird for some people.
Yeah. I think that, again, there may be a context for it, but I think in the idea of teaching your kids what you're doing when you're dressing up, these could be great teaching and witnessing opportunities. Depending on what they choose to dress up as, and as parents, we can make suggestions to them as, like here's some heroic saints that you might want to dress up as, or maybe you do dress up as a skeleton to remind people at a certain age, like what this is all about. If you provide that connection. For example, my kids last year when they went out for the neighborhood walk, a lot of them got dressed up as saints, and when they got to the doors, one daughter, Mary, she went to the door and she was dressed like a queen. And when she answered the door, the lady said, "Oh, who are you? You look like queen." She's like, "Yes, I'm Queen Mary." She's like, "Oh." She's like, "Mary, Mother of God."
Oh,
and she's like, "Oh," So just these little ways we can sort of like drop hints and sort of reclaim this holiday, but just to inform.
What's what you do?
Yeah, that's right. In the same vein, I usually most years I'll dress up myself. So in the past couple of years, I've dressed up as Moses. I made up my own 10 Commandments. I did Noah's Ark, and I made an ark. And it's a way to engage the parents who are walking around with their kids too,
Right.
and remind them we're celebrating the Vigil of All Saints. There's a reason why we're doing this. It's not just about the candy.
Okay, let me read you another comment. This came in from Elaine Von D'Alessandro. It seems to have morphed into Satan's feast day. Plus, I am very phobic of spiders. I don't celebrate it. So don't dress as a spider if you're going to Elaine's house. Satan's feast day. Is this where some of the confusion, do you think, comes from? That people see we're celebrating death, we're going to graveyards, that has a more occultic kind of themes to it?
I think it's definitely crept in there, and I think that's something as parents we have to be on guard about, and protect our children in some respects from that.
How so? What do you?
Well, for example, if we're walking around the neighborhood and there's this big sort of haunted house, or there's different macabre elements. When the kids are a little bit younger, we'll just kind of skip that house or we'll go to the next. You don't want to scare them or give them nightmares. But there may be times for when your kids are a little bit older to explain to them, okay, this is what's going on. This is what we believe. But we maybe need to pray for these people. Here's our correct understanding. So again, these are all teaching moments, and as parents, it's our opportunity.
Do you think that Halloween, because it's Halloween, is more of an opportunity for those people to be engaged in what they're doing? Aren't they kind of defacing all Catholic or Christian holidays anyway?
Sure, of course they are. I mean, you would be
desecrating, not defacing.
Naive to think that Satanists, witches, all of those people are not actively involved on Christmas and Easter and our other big feast days as well. Of course they are. But we have to, as Catholics, move ahead with our feast days and celebrate them the way that we find that they're appropriate. And again, re-Christianize, re-evangelize, let people know this is what they're celebrating. I mean, to go back a second to your earlier point, I think part of the reason why people feel as if it's such a bad thing, this celebration of death and that, is because to a certain extent, we've become afraid of death. We've become afraid of suffering in this society. We're too worried about mortality because for many people there exists nothing else but life.
Can I just add something? Do you think that people maybe are reluctant to dress up as death or anything like that, or as evil, because we don't want to accept the fact that evil exists?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it, for sure.
I mean, we don't dress up as vampires because we accept the fact that evil exists.
Or it could be the opposite. So many people engage in it because they don't really believe that it exists, even though evil does exist. So many people engage in that
pull
type
out the
of
Ouija
behavior
board
because they don't believe it, because they don't understand it, right? But they really are inadvertently taking part in that, right?
Okay, another comment, just because they're really good comments. This came from Alcibiades Malapi Nelson, who's in Toronto as well. If the so-called Catholic wants to worship Satan, no problem. The most blessed sacrament gets stolen and desecrated in that night for no coincidental reason. So he's obviously referring to some things that we know happen. I don't know if they happen more on Halloween than on other days. If the day has been hijacked or is being used by whatever group to do whatever they want, the fact that I let my kids dress up and go and get free candy does that mean that I am unwittingly am participating in this feast that other people have claimed for whatever purpose? Does that make
I don't
sense?
think so. I think most neighbors in your community that's not even on their radar, it's just a fun thing for kids, like they don't even think that deeply. And it's, again, our opportunity to maybe shed a little bit of light in there, present some positives, to sort of counter maybe some of the negative elements that are going on.
Okay, so then what advice would you've already given us some, but what advice would you give? Like if I'm a young parent, my little girl, she's going to go trick-or-treating for the first time this year. I'm a little concerned. I'm Catholic. I don't know. What would you tell them?
Well, first I would say it's definitely okay to go trick-or-treating. Again, I wouldn't necessarily take them to, a theme park's haunted house show, but definitely okay to go trick-or-treating. You should also consider doing something to celebrate the fact that we are commemorating our saints. Maybe pick a particular saint. If the child's very young, they're not going to sit still and listen for very long, so you can't read them the whole works of St. Ignatius of Loyola, but maybe you could pick a saint that's appropriate for them, same gender, maybe even some of the same likes and dislikes, and give them a one or two sentence biography on that saint and tell them why we care about that saint and how that they've influenced us. Incorporate the saints into their lives, right, in a special way.
Right. And you can dress as a saint, Queen Mary. Where's the connection with going out and getting candy? Well, that's where that's my disconnect.
Of course. And for that, you're going to have to go much deeper. You're going to actually have to, this is, like Patrick was talking about, there are teaching moments. And this is a teaching moment, but like any good teacher, you're going to have to prepare. So you're going to have to do a little bit of research.
So we'll find out the historical
Find out the historical reasons and then explain it to them. Explain it in the language and at the level that they can understand, but let them know that this is one of the reasons we do this is because we're Catholic.
Yeah, okay.
And sort of counteract the greed sort of associated with get as much candy as you can. One thing our family does is try to encourage them to give a portion of it away to other kids or to others, parents included. But anyway, just to give them a sense that there's an act of charity that can happen with this as well.
Okay, all good advice. We need to leave it here, but the discussion continues on Facebook, facebook.saltandlighttv.org. We're going to conclude our conversation by reflecting on this Sunday's gospel. We always leave the last words to the one who is the word. So this is from Matthew chapter 23, verses 8 to 12. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all students. And call no one your father on earth, for you have one Father, the one in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. So again, that's from Matthew chapter 23. Patrick.
Well, I was actually meditating a little bit earlier in the passage on the Pharisees and they're dressing up their wide phalanges and phylacteries rather, and long fringes, and just this concept of it's not just about the dressing up. It's not about the superficial of that holiday for Halloween. We have to go deeper with that, and again, it's an opportunity for us to witness and to be humble.
Right. Jeez.
Yeah, and to speak to what the passage that you read, I think it talks to us about humility in the same way, but a little differently. We like to pretend a lot that we are greater than what we are. We do it all the time when we meet people. We sometimes tell them our titles. We give more information about how good we are about things, and less about just that we are a person. And so in this passage we talk about don't call any man father, because everybody likes to exalt themselves. Everybody likes to be rabbi. Everybody likes to be teacher. Everybody likes to be father. But we need to take a step back, I think. It's something that we can gain from that, and to be a little bit more humble. So.
Right. Well, good. Thank you. Thank you both for the discussion. I hope it's been useful. It's been interesting for me. Our two guests have been Jason Gennaro, father of 5, and Patrick Douglas, father of 6, our dad's panel. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Again, the conversation continues on Facebook. Join in facebook.saltandlighttv.org. That's also where we post the question of the week. And if you want to watch this episode or any other of our Perspectives episodes, visit us at saltandlighttv.org/perspectives. That's where we archive all our shows. That's all for tonight. I'll see you next week.